You walk into a room and within seconds, your team is judging you. Are you clear or confusing? Are you selfish or selfless? Are you weak or strong? So in this episode, you learn exactly how to win the room in the first 30 seconds. For that, I'm joined by none other than Nancy Duarte, a global communications guru, CEO, and the author of 6 best-selling books, including Slidology and DataStory. For 35 years, she's advised the highest performing brands and executives in the world, and she's cracked the code of how story drives persuasion in business. We break down the fastest way leaders lose an audience, what happens psychologically in the first 30 seconds, and the framework elite communicators use to move their audience to action. So, let's elevate your first 30 seconds. What do the best leaders do differently in the first 30 seconds when they're on stage or speaking to an audience?
Yeah, it's a great question because you have to make a good first impression. Their perception, like right when they walk in, they should kind of perceive what's going on. So you set the tone and the expectation empathetically. Like if you're doing a layoff, you shouldn't stand at the door with balloons, you have to kind of match the expectation of what's happening. So in the first 30 seconds, you need to ground them in reality throughout the talk, make it very clear that there's something they can, possibly do about it, make them the hero of the story so that they help themselves and help others get unstuck. I know a lot of people say, tell a joke or use a hook, and those are important. And you could turn your first impression into a hook, but you have to understand that if you're formulaic and you use a joke every time, it's just like you're not adapting to what the audience needs. And so I highly recommend you really think through first time they see me, I want them to perceive what? I want them to perceive I care. I want them to perceive this is important. I just gave our kickoff and I needed them to perceive it as urgent, right? And so even how I showed up was with a sense of urgency. So I think the first impression kind of sets the tone for the whole thing.
Intention is the word, right? If project a sense of urgency, we have to communicate it. How would you advise a leader to communicate, let's say, a sense of urgency to the team?
Me, when I delivered it, I had incredible conviction that this direction was right. So it became kind of binary. You either jump on or you're just not a fit. And that's hard to do for leaders. And I spoke quickly. I was commanding. My word choices were kind of finite in a sense, to where we had an anonymous poll that we used during our kickoff. People were putting things in there like, wow, I kind of feel like if we don't do what the teacher says, we might get kicked out of school. It's like, yeah, pretty much, And I've been in business for 43 years. I've never had one strategy that felt so urgent. And so get on the bus or you're just not anymore. And that was hard. I don't think making it binary is always the right thing. But because this was urgent,
And you did it with intention and conviction. Conviction is important, right? If my message, if I don't really buy into my own message, people will just also not buy into that. I think that's pretty clear. Yet a lot of leaders, or some leaders sometimes, try to do just that.
Yeah.
So if we inverse this, what's the fastest way to lose an audience in the first minute?
I think it's just making it all about you, being self-congratulatory, or all about the company. Like there's that famous, all about me slide or all about the company slide, and just kicking it off and not having it be anything about the audience and not making it clear that you understand them and ignoring the audience needs. There's so many people that just show up, especially people that are famous or well-respected. They just show up thinking that they can say or do anything without first thinking about who they're speaking with and the right way to approach them.
Yeah. And why do so many smart leaders still struggle to tell a good story? And they seem to be stuck in this fact-telling age or middle manager fact-telling style.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we have a habit of reporting and informing. I think reporting and informing are both opportunities to persuade. And so I think part of the reason leaders won't tell an actual story, like an anecdote, especially a personal story, is the fastest and most powerful way to have you come across as authentic and believable. And what a story will do is it'll help the audience believe. It'll help them believe in your values. It'll help them believe in your vision. It'll help them believe that you should lead and they want to follow you. And so the reason leaders aren't telling stories very readily is it requires the 3-act structure for it to be a good story. And that 3-act structure is, there's this great leader who encountered some messy problems and then they overcame them, and usually we tell happy ending stories, but it's that messy middle. Like you have to show up and say, oh my gosh, I know how to solve this because I totally screwed it up on my last job. And you can explain all, how you overcame the roadblock. And I'll follow a leader that's failed and talks about it before I'll follow one who shows up, patting themselves on the back like they do everything right, because nobody does everything right. Yeah, I think that's why they struggle to tell stories, because some people aren't safe at work being really honest about a failure or being really honest about a roadblock. Yet those are the stories that inspire people to follow you.
Super interesting, because I agree with you. I think there are two parts to this, right? Sometimes they don't know how to tell a story, and you just outline, we need 3 acts, and usually it's something like excite, disturb, assure, just as you mentioned, like great thing happens, then all the challenges and obstacles, that's the easy part because they're always top of mind. And then the assurance bit. But I agree with you. There's also this mindset issue that in order for a story to be really resonating with my team or bigger audience, in a way, we have to be a bit vulnerable as well, a bit personal, and be willing to open up about our experience and the things that didn't go well. Everyone likes to talk about the wins, but that's not what makes a story exciting. So yes, it's mindset, but also method.
Yes, absolutely. All of that.
And maybe another element is data, right? Often, in business, it's about numbers, it's about data. And I mean, you famously wrote whole books about this, like DataStory, which is, of course, it's a classic. I mean, everyone I know has it, and I've recommended it many times. Can you just, give our audience a flavor of how do you tell a good data story? The subject matter itself isn't that exciting. How do you make it exciting?
There's, how to shape it in the shape of a story, and then there's how to deliver it to create drama. And it's interesting, for this body of work, I took thousands of slides of our customer slides, taped them up on a wall, and the facts were there. I mean, they were plotted well because a lot of them we did, but I particularly took interest on all of the words associated with the data on the slide. And the most effective ones used a 3-act structure. And so what you do is you state, you state your insight. So the first thing you do is your insight from the data. We have data coming out the wazoo, right? And so the job of the future is going to be able to identify the insights. Now, AI can do this, but sometimes an insight will be a counterintuitive thing. AI will never actually push you to be innovative with this data. So the 3-act structure is, I found this insight in the data. You state the insight. The middle of the story is the data, the actual data that you want to change. So, the middle is where you go through your transformation, the messy middle. Now, changing the trajectory of the data, you might need to be driving a number up or you might need to be driving a number down. That's where the work is going to happen, and it's messy. And then the 3rd act is, how are we going to do this? What verb do you need to use so that this 3-act structure appeals to the executive suite for a decision? So the 3-act structure is actually used for executive decision making. So data can sit in these pools, in these ponds, in these lakes all day long, but it's not worth anything to you if you don't see the decision that needs to be made. So let's say you see the decision that needs to be made, but you can't articulate it in a way that other people see it and feel like it's actionable. And so that's what a data story does. So there's the 3 acts, and choosing the right verb. And it's so weird to say that 3rd act is, therefore, we're going to what? And it might be something like, hey, we're going to capture market share. But if you say something like, we need to create a new flavor, well, that's different than we're going to create a new flavor to create market share or to dominate the market, right? You can already feel one is like just a small task and the other is a massive, possibly company-wide initiative that needs to happen. So that's kind of this choose your actions carefully when you're telling a data story.
I think you're alluding to something really important, because our storytelling in business is not to move people emotionally or just to move people emotionally, but to move them to action, right? If in Hollywood, you're moving people emotionally, there's no action required. Watch the movie, happy end at the end. Perfect. That's all we want from this. We in business want to move people to action. Yet many people create and hold presentations with the intention to inform the audience.
I think that presentations that are there to inform are also persuasive. It's a little bit different. So I just kind of want to pile on the last bit, because just because you're informing someone doesn't mean it can't be kind of create an emotion. There's certain shapes in my data story book. I applied the shape of a chart to Vonnegut's shape of a story. And so what happens is if you could picture a chart where it's going down, 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 and you're trying to motivate people to have it curve up and have a happy ending, that is a time to build the charts over time and then build them back up and celebrate. Like I watched someone kind of do a Cinderella story that happened in the data at the very end. He was just informing on the status, but at the very end, he got a standing ovation. So I think people think that inform doesn't mean that we can feel. And so I think anytime you're communicating, whether it's to inform or persuade, I kind of blur those two. I look at two binary things. People are either going to be resistant or they're going to be curious. When they're curious, that's where information will persuade them. Like most of the time, even at a project management meeting, you're going through information so people understand where you're stuck, where things are slow, those things are all very, very important. So you have to think through who's in your audience, even when it's informative, not only when it's persuasive. You need to define, where are they? What do they know? What do they not know? Where are they at in the journey? And where do I want them to be? Where do I want them to move to? Like maybe they're agitated, the project stalled, and I want them to move to feeling like we can solve it, like we can do it and get it back on track. That's still an informative presentation, but you're still trying to rally the troops.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. And, I'm a total sucker for storytelling frameworks, the 3 stages and so on. I actually wrote an ebook about it called 21 Storytelling Frameworks. I linked to it in the show notes, but totally on board that as a leader. I mean, you don't need 21, but you have a few at your disposal because context and audiences change, obviously. So sometimes it's a data story, sometimes it needs to be inspirational, sometimes it's more about the information. To have, I say 3 to 5 in your repertoire is good practice for leaders. So I'd love to hear about slides from you because the science of slides is very interesting. And in business, I've read the statistic that if you're in a large organization, you may spend 2 days a working week creating or listening to presentations/slides. So how we do this is important because if we don't do it right, a lot of energy and productivity is being lost creating something that may not be of so much value.
Well, slides are changing fast. So I think there's one AI tool that can make you slides born every week right now. I was just like, oh my God, here's another slide tool because we're tracking because people's expectation of what AI can do is high and it's not really delivering on that promise yet. And what's happening is I think leaders need to know what a slide is kind of getting redefined right now. So when slides first came out, PowerPoint was so ugly. We had to take a hammer and an anvil, right? And that's how we made our mark. I could write Slideology, but by default, these tools were not attractive. So what's happening right now is, they call it AI slop. And if you're trying to use it for persuasion, you could call it slopaganda or something like it's like trying to make it persuade people through slop just isn't going to work. And so slide clarity, like slides are going to get AI and weird things growing on the slide through these weird images people are making in Nana Banana and stuff like that. So I think you have to just go back and stop and be like, what is one idea per slide? What is the one point? So the first thing you have to do before you make your slides is decide what is my one big idea, which is your point of view. What's at stake if someone does or does not adopt your point of view? That becomes the lens under which you make every slide. Don't even make a slide if it's not in support of your big idea and moving them towards your big idea. So each slide should just make one point, one idea. The audience will spend a lot of time processing it. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 points, they're not listening to you. They're going to be processing your slide. Now, I do use dense slides when we're in a meeting. I could use it and be like, hey, just read this. We're going to talk about it. Or, and I don't have to present or verbalize a slide that's really dense. But that's just for internal, like a working document. But we still only make 1 point per slide. One decision needs to be made from this slide, even for internal meetings. So I think that's got to do it that way.
Yeah, I agree. There are slides to be verbalized and there are reading slides, a deck that, it just summarizes information. Totally on board. I love the point about 1 point per slide and that all needs to be in service of the bigger point you're making and what's at stake. I love for that 1 point to be the headline of a slide, because that will make it immediately clear to the audience, but also for me as a presenter, I probably have many things going on that day and I can see it as, that's the slide and I make the point here.
Well, it's so easy. Like if you have your big idea, even if you do a mind map, or I tend to make mine look almost like org charts. It's like, here's my main idea. 3 points I need to make to support those 3 points. I need to make these things. Like it also creates a logical structure. I do things analog still, which I know is shows my age, but I mean, I have my notebook here with just like I'm mind mapping all day. So if you have one main point, just make sure everything that you surround in this little map of your talk supports that point.
I use analog as well for the creative part, right? To think about the storyline and all that. And I do think there is some science to suggest that, it encourages creativity more than going back to PowerPoint, or Google Slides or something like that. So I would say it's not age related, that it's
Thank you.
Wisdom. Anything else? You often talk about tension in your communication, right? What is that important? Why do we need tension? Don't we have enough tension in our lives and in business? We need to inject more artificially?
Yeah, I mean, the concept of storytelling, when you sit through a movie or anything, is it sets the stage. And then the tension, it rises and rises and rises, and your heart's racing, and it rises and rises, and you're longing for this story to resolve, right? And so that's what we mean by tension. And so in my TED Talk, I studied, I had a book called 100 Greatest Speeches of All Time. And I just studied them. And then I put gobs of decks from the highest performing brands in the world. And I really looked for patterns. And I noticed that the greatest presenters use contrast. You could call it tension, but they start to talk about what is, and then they introduce what could be. Revisit what is, and then they introduce what could be. And that creates tension. So suddenly people are like, oh, where I'm at right now isn't as appealing or as alluring as what could be. And you're persuading them to this new place in the future. So that's contrast. It could be called tension. But it all needs to be grounded, not in your own what is, what could be, but in the audience's journey. So you can get them to move from one state of being and behaving and a new state of believing and behaving. So that's all in service of like, oh, you're behaving like this. What if this? You're behaving like that. Oh, if we did this and we behaved like this, we'd have these great outcomes. So it's that kind of a cadence. And it's not like people shouldn't even really notice it. It's not like you would say, oh, here's what is, here's what could be. And sometimes it's a rapid back and forth at the sentence level. Sometimes you could go for 10 minutes on a what is or 10 minutes on a what could be. It shouldn't be performative or formulaic whatsoever. It's not like Dr. Martin Luther King. It's not like he knew my formula. I was 1 year old. It's not like he knew the formula and copied it and built it into his speech. He crafted and crafted and crafted and crafted and crafted. And his best speech happens to have contrast in it. So it's more like that.
There may be a neurological reason for this, right? That our brain is pretty good at detecting contrast and tension because that could signal opportunity, it could signal threat. It's very hard also as a brand or communicator to get better across. Like, this is better than that. What does it mean, right? But if you say, this isn't this and this is that, and it's the opposite, I think that makes it quite easy to understand for our brains to understand it. And in a way, if we follow the definition of a story, it's a tale of transformation, in Matthew Dix's words. In a way, there is no transformation among humans without tension. In a way, it feels like it's an integral part of telling a good story, that you have the transformation, which is accompanied by tension.
Yeah. And it was so funny because some call it tension, some call it conflict, right? And when I was carrying these story methods into business, God, it's been 16 years ago. Well, no, it's been 18. Oh my God, long time ago. I couldn't use the words tension or conflict, because those are, you don't talk about and that's not, I was like, it's the rise of tension in a story. So that's why I had to call it roadblocks. I named it the messy middle and all of those things because so people would understand this rise of tension. They're like, I don't want tension in my meetings or whatever. You're like, no. So
don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
Are you sick and tired of spending 8 hours preparing for a 1 hour presentation? You're not alone. That's why I created my tactical guide, 50 presentation hacks. It's for free. Grab it in the show notes. There's obviously that in business communication, that mix between emotion and the logic part, right? We need the logic, the numbers in business for sure. But without emotion, it's very hard to get to a conclusion or to a decision, persuade people without the emotion. How do you think about that balance?
I think that
tension.
People will not believe you if they can't see or hear your logical case, your logical thinking. I look at empathy as a thinking foundation. In fact, in our workshops, we call the job aid story thinking, right? So you have to empathetically build a logical structure. And so that logic supports what's at stake. Logic has to support, maybe you're asking the audience to do something. If it's your employees, you're asking them to get a new skill. I mean, there's so many situations, but you have to have logic support the emotional stakes. And then what we do is once we've structurally and very soundly created a structure, it's like the tree, right? And the emotions become a little bit like some of the leaves on the tree. It makes it beautiful, makes it shimmery. And then we find the spot where people are going to get particularly stuck, or a place where people might particularly be afraid of the future, or this part isn't clear. That's where we put the different emotional appeals in. Now that could be a photo. It could be an image. It could be something that's very arresting imagery wise. It could be a super persuasive chart with a blowout call out. It's this moment where they must engage and they must change. And it's funny, I'm talking about business communications, and businesses are always in a perpetual motion forward. And I think employees and some customers just want stasis. They don't want to move forward. So it's like, you can't manipulate people to move forward, but you should influence them too, because then their stock prices go up, or then the company performs better, right? And so it is weird. 200 years ago, we didn't have to be so persuasive in business. We just went in our coveralls and went to work, right? And so it's very, very different. And you have to be very careful not to be considered manipulative. Tender line to walk right there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if people feel manipulated, that usually triggers reactance, which gets you the opposite of what your intention is.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Does the order matter between logic and emotion? Should we start with emotion, or does it not matter?
That's a really good question. I've never thought about that. We've worked on projects where it's practically 100% emotion. Like we worked with a guy who's on a famous weight loss show host. He wanted a speaking gig, a speaking circuit. And so as we started interviewing him, his passion, we were like, why are you helping all these people with addiction? And then he dawned on me, he goes, oh my God, I was addicted, right? And so he decided to actually open up and talk about his own addiction problems. Very emotional. And you know what? We didn't use slides. We just changed the color in the room as he talked. So it was like sunrise, it got completely dark. And then it was like sun was setting, it got dark. And he told part of the story in the dark, and then the sun rose. That was very emotional. The whole thing was emotion, but it was highly structured. So it had the right kind of rise and fall and cathartic release, right? That doesn't happen. It's not like your CEO is going to get up and do a talk like that in business, right? So you choose the degree of emotion versus analytics based on the audience. So if I was going into a bunch of biotech engineers, I probably would skim a little thin, like sugar coating, like the tiny sugar coating on a pill. That's about how much emotional appeal I would do. The bulk of it would be logical and data based in fact. So there could be no logical resistance. That would be the worst thing, because you get discredited immediately if they're like, that didn't make any sense. That made no sense. You're just dismissed right away.
Yeah. Very good point. I mean, context and audience is always in communication super important. Exactly. Meaning that the engineering department, yes, that will be heavy on logic. If you're speaking at a big conference about weight loss, that just has to be emotional. I'm totally on board with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
My view is that it's better to start with the emotion and then come with the logic. It just seems to chime with how the human brain works. That emotion is fast, it's ancient, right? And we can open hearts and minds with it. And then the logic part, because then people are like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, but does this stand up to scrutiny? And then to sort of the double punch of and here's the logic, here's the numbers. That seems to work quite well from my perspective.
I mean, there's really no wrong way, as long as if you start with emotion, you're mapping out, you might be mapping out the audience's pain. You might be mapping out the audience's resistance. You have to place the emotion at the right time, because 100% emotional talk in business, but I agree. You could flip it and it could be just as effective. Yeah.
And sometimes you can tag team, right? Maybe the CEO stands up and does an emotional talk about the coming year, and then the CTO or the COO comes in and does the logical part. That can also work quite well.
Yeah, I think what you're addressing, and we do our internal talks like this. Tim Cook does them like this. Like it's the CEO is more like the curator of other voices and other temperaments. Like one might appeal, like sales usually appeals to the heart and they get everyone pumped up, but the CTO is way more logical. So I think during talks or doing all hands meetings, having different voices say the same thing from their own personal temperament, I think is wise. So that was a good point. Yeah.
Also, some people are extroverted, some people are introverted. Often it's the introverted who come to me, and maybe same for you, say like, it doesn't feel natural. It seems like more of a lift for me. How can you help me become a better communicator without necessarily copying what the extroverts are doing? Because that's not me.
Yeah, I love this question because I think introverts need to really leverage their like quiet conviction, because introverts that have something to say is one of the most powerful things in the world if you can get them to say it, because they have the deep thinking, they have the ideas, they have sometimes the contrarian point of view. But like my husband is a better communicator than I am, but getting him to actually speak up, and then he'll tell me after, I'm like, that is so potent. That would have been so powerful, right? So I think they have some of the most important things to share. And I feel like if an introvert got up and was flailing its arm, like I've been leaning in the camera like that, they wouldn't be showing up as their true self. So I would say they need to kind of leverage this quiet conviction, say what they need to say, support it with the evidence, prepare a good structure, and be their true selves, like be their natural communicators. Because if you're trying too hard to put a mask on and pretend you're someone else, people will see through that. It'll actually hurt your talk. It won't help them. And you can tell, like when you watch TED Talks, you can tell the ones that are just up there, blah, and the ones who are like a little on the nervous side, but carefully chose their words. And it's just as effective. So I would also say introverts, all of us need to use tools that help us feel comfortable on stage. So like I still use a comfort monitor. I have my notes there. If you look at Sheryl Sandberg's TED Women talk, she had no slides behind her and she just had bullet points on her comfort monitor. She actually had PowerPoint in slideshow mode and it was just bullet points there. But you could have your note cards. It just doesn't matter. You need to be comfortable. So don't do anything that when you walk into the meeting or have your iPad and look down, it doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't matter. Just know what you want to say. And then when you do look up to say it with conviction and have whatever comfort crutches you need. So you show up as yourself.
Super interesting. I think introverts and extroverts have obviously different challenges. And for introverts, my experience, they try to be in control. They want to control exactly what they say and focus very much on the words. I said, look, it's very much dependent on the delivery, how you get this across. So let's not over obsess about the wording, but focus half of our prep time on how you deliver it, because that will make or break the talk or the presentation. And it's totally fine if you don't say it in these exact words. There are a few sentences in it that should be delivered like that, but 99% of what you say can be a bit more free-flowing. The beginning, the ending, the key message, yes, on point, but between that, let it loose a little bit.
And I think extroverts, the cautionary tale for them is they won't even plan because they know they could let it loose, right? Yes. And so that's where they just get up and let it loose. And then the audience feels like, God, did they even take a minute to actually think about what's going on, right? We could just get up and feel like, well, I'll just talk. And as I'm talking, it'll come to me. Like a lot of extroverts are like that. Yeah. And that's ineffective. Yeah, it takes more
monologue without coming to a point. That's the pitfall that extroverts sometimes fall into. And, both have different challenges, right? So the extroverts need to plan more, and the introverts maybe let
loosen up more.
And be okay with this is an unnatural situation that you cannot fully control, but you said yes to it, so here we are.
That's awesome. Yeah.
What trends do you see in business communication at the moment?
I'm seeing there's so much shifting happening right now. Like there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal and then Business Insider just kind of unpacked it. People are looking for people who know how to really write. There's ads for storytellers. These big LLM companies are actually building communications departments, right? And so I think people who are really good at their craft, really great at the craft, even Mark Andreessen said this, people who are really great at design are going to be exceptionally great. People who are really great at writing are going to be exceptionally great because they'll know what great looks like and they'll be able to push the tools. But what's happening is with the deployment of AI, obviously we're seeing sloppiness. And I think the brands are starting to move more in person. So the Freeman Trends report is showing that events are up. And people are not going to believe things that are in writing or things that are in video are actually from a human anymore. So that's why people want to see, I want to see the CEO and I want to see it come out of his mouth. And then I know it's real, or then I know it's true. As a CEO, I'm using multiple forms of media. Like I said, I kind of launched a strategy this year, and I had pushback. We had a few employees that were, pretty vocal protesters or whatever. And so I addressed everything. We did anonymous Slido and anonymous Q&A. We answered every single one. We bunched them into things. We answered every single concern. There's so much uncertainty right now, so much fog. When I saw ChatGPT 2 years ago, I actually kind of gave the company, not gave it, but I had my exec team run it for the last 2 years so I could jump into AI because I knew it was a tornado. And what's happened now is November, December timeframe, that tornado was at such a velocity. I mean, I just watched, I was in it. I was building software. I've never done that. I jumped in. I decided I'm going to try to build so I could learn, so I could keep my eye on the pulse. And it is swirling so fast right now in incredible uncertainty. But because I spent the last 2 years in it, feeling around in the dark, it's still the fog with zero visibility, feeling around so much that I could show up in January of this year with certainty. This is where we need to be in 6 months. I could define it, and I was certain, I was confident, right? And so I think finding that certainty right now with this, I think someone recently called it like poly crisis. Every front, that's what it was called, a poly crisis. And that's what we have. We got AI, the automation of jobs. What is that going to be? How's it going to impact businesses? We've got global unrest. There's just a lot on our employees' minds. And so I think what's happening with business right now is employees are having a hard time. They're just having a really hard time because there's no leader on the planet who could look at you in the eye with certainty and say, I know our 10-year plan and I'm confident we're going to get there. It's impossible. There's too many moving parts. But I was really pleased. That's so weird that I'm saying that to you, but I was very pleased that I was very confident that I knew exactly what my org needed to do, at least for 6 months. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't groped in the dark, felt everything in the fog and then saw the swirling threat and then, we're moving our bus so we don't, get hit by some of these storms. So it is a weird time to lead. And
I totally agree that employees are, they're looking for direction. I think all of it's made are connected in my mind because the storytelling, you were looking for storytellers, right? Wall Street Journal and others, as you mentioned, wrote about this, and the jobs out there, they're really well paid. So people are looking for high quality people who can shape a narrative because the world doesn't seem to make any sense anymore. No one knows where we're going. It's actually possible to shape a narrative and necessary for a lot of companies because everything is changing. And that is partly due to AI, certainly. And AI makes communication for leaders even more challenging. I always think about our parents or grandparents, how they worked and communicated. It was so simple and, compared to modern leaders. Different languages, time zones, generations with very different expectations, global supply chains, media, all the social media. And now it's not corporate communications. Everyone wants to hear from the CEO or other leaders in the business, ideally in person, as you said. So leaders are like, gosh, how do I deal with this complexity and just the sheer volume of communications demands on me?
It's hard. Like I spent 9 hours as CEO, who's also building software, and 9 hours just shaping a video memo. And then I had to shape all these other shorter clips. And I was like, I told my chief people officer, I was like, is this necessary? And she goes, no, it's going to have huge payouts. And she's just like, keep going, Nancy, keep going. And I did. I got a bunch of thank you notes. Like, I can't believe, thanks for taking the time. You addressed all my concerns, and I'm just communicating more. I mean, like you said, I thought we always had to communicate so much, and we're having to communicate more. And channels are expanding all the channels we communicate in.
I think we have to be also gutsy, especially large organizations, to let other channels go, like the intranet or, long memos, that sort of thing. I tell CEOs, hey, just record a 1-minute video every Friday. It doesn't matter where you are, on your phone, like rough cut, and just tell people, where are we going? Why are we going there? And what do we have to focus on right now to get there? So you're connecting the here and now to the bigger vision of the business. And you can do that, if you can do that in 1 minute every week and share it on your Teams or Slack channel where you can post very short videos, people will actually see it and they will internalize it. So if you do this 8 times in 8 weeks, everyone in the business will understand where the business is going, which in most businesses is not the case, as we know. Most people will not know what the vision or the values of the business are.
I like that. I've not done that. And I think I like that so much so. I might send a 1-minute memo this Friday because I think if you're just nudging them along, they're like beats in a story, right? It's like, here's what I see through my eyes today. Mine are usually 4 to 8 minutes. So I'm going to see if I can do a 1 minute.
It can be shorter and longer versions. Totally. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
I think the good thing about 1 minute is that people actually watch it because everyone has a minute if the boss sends them a video. Nancy, this is so good. Where can people find out more about you, your business, the book?
Oh, it's so nice. Yeah, thank you. It's Duarte.com. I have a great newsletter up on LinkedIn, super active up there. I have little conversations going all the time. And on Twitter, I'm at Nancy Duarte. And then we also have at Duarte up on Twitter.
Amazing. And we link to that, of course, in the show notes.
Thank you.
This is always my final question, Nancy. What's your best piece of communications advice?
I think that would be to approach your audience humbly and realize that they are the hero of your story. So if your audience doesn't get what you're trying to convey, they don't understand your idea and walk out the room with it adopted, you lost. And so they're the hero of your idea. And so you need to think about the audience as the hero, and you're simply a moment in their life. You're a moment of time that's helping them get unstuck on the way to this new future that you're trying to drive them towards. So I think it flips your mindset, it flips your heart. It makes you understand I'm not the most important person in the room, but the audience is, and helping them understand clearly is the most important thing I think communicators should do.
It flips the heart. Wonderful.
Yeah.
What a wonderful closing, Nancy Duarte. Thank you so much. Much appreciated everything you do. People check out the books, check out the newsletter. It's really worth it. Thank you. I appreciate you and everything you do. Thanks for watching. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the Speak Like a CEO channel. It means the world to me and it helps us keep bringing you world-class insights and guests.